At a vineyard in Middleburg, Virginia, on our daughter's wedding day, Camille Whitfield, my spouse of 19 years, told me, "You're not on the guest list. There must be a mistake." Despite funding the entire event, I found myself barred from entering the tent filled with white roses by my wife. I had helped her daughter with algebra homework when she was 11 and attended her college graduation in place of her biological father. Standing before me, Camille resembled a gatekeeper denying access to a party I'd financed. After 3 seconds of looking at her, I simply said, "It's all right," and departed for my car. By the time I reached home in Great Falls, I had already contacted my lawyer. In 2 days, Camille Whitfield and her daughter would discover the blunder they had committed. I am Whitfield Calloway, and this narrative recounts how the woman I adored for 19 years attempted to expunge me from a life I'd crafted over one day she believed I wouldn't resist. At 52, I've spent the past 26 years as an estate planning lawyer in Alexandria, Virginia. My practice is situated just 2 blocks from the King Street waterfront, housed within a renovated townhouse that exudes tranquility, encouraging clients to confide in me their most confidential affairs. I assist individuals in determining property distribution upon death. I draft trusts. I organize inheritances. I mediate disputes between estranged siblings who unexpectedly need to harmonize over the division of assets. The work isn't glamorous, but it imparted a valuable lesson that many never grasp until it's too late. The importance of contracts overshadows promises. 14 years ago, I encountered Camille at a charity event for the Alexandria Symphony. She was 40, fresh from a divorce, managing to raise her 9-year-old daughter Brielle on an intermittent income from part-time interior design work and inconsistent child support payments. The evening, she donned a modest navy dress and minimal jewelry, just small gold studs. Her laughter, carried across the room by its infectious nature, made me momentarily forget my assignment of networking with a benefactor. Our encounter took place during a silent auction, where we exchanged introductions. She confided later that she nearly didn't attend due to financial considerations with the babysitter. Since our wedding, I've often pondered this, contemplating the possibility of never meeting her and the convenience my life would have if I hadn't. Our relationship spanned 2 years before I proposed marriage. Purposely, I approached the situation in much the same manner as everything else. I wished to become acquainted with Brielle initially, to observe Camille's maternal qualities before making a decision about my role as a spouse. When I began attending Brielle's soccer games on Saturday mornings at age 11, I sat next to Camille in a folding chair, learning the names of her teammates and discovering that she favored grape Gatorade and disliked being referred to as Brie. She was a serious child, reticent in a way that prompted one to strive for her trust rather than presume it. It took nearly a year before she permitted me to assist with her homework. It took 2 years before she addressed me by anything other than Whitfield. The first time she referred to me as Dad, she was 13, and the term slipped out during a conversation about staying at a friend's house. She realized her mistake, blushed, and corrected herself to Whitfield. I reassured her that either was acceptable. After that, I didn't press the matter. I allowed her to reach that point at her own pace. Camille and I exchanged vows in a compact ceremony at a Middleburg chapel when Brielle turned 12. Brielle, her mother's sidekick as a junior bridesmaid, donned a pale green gown for the occasion. During the festivities, she delivered a toast that seemed rehearsed and yet caught her off guard with tears. She acknowledged me as the first person to show up without being prompted twice. For nearly 2 decades, I preserved that note, the index card scribbled by Brielle's hand, in the highest drawer of my office desk. It remains there. Upon waking the day following a wedding I couldn't attend, I revisited those words. Over the subsequent years, I constructed a life with these 2 women, convinced that this bond was unchanging, as a man can be about things he's never doubted before. I covered Brielle's braces, car insurance, study abroad expenses in Florence, expenses her biological father, Roy Prout, who intermittently appeared and disappeared like the weather, never contributed a penny towards. When Brielle got accepted into George Washington University, I assisted her in completing the financial aid forms, and when the aid fell short, I discreetly moved funds from an account she was unaware of. On the day Brielle defended her senior thesis, as her mother had a client meeting and Roy didn't respond to phone calls, I accompanied her down the hallway instead of an aisle. I attended every significant event. I was there for the insignificant ones too, because that's what one does when they claim a child as their own, disregarding biology's stance on the matter. During those years, Camille's career thrived in a manner that filled me with genuine pride. From undertaking minor residential design tasks to heading her own company, Callaway Interiors, which later catered to notable clients like 2 Congress members and a Saudi diplomat's spouse. I assisted in setting up the LLC. I scrutinized every contract prior to her signing it. I endured 3 years of gradual, unspectacular growth with her, those initial years characterized by driving an aging Volvo to job sites and subsisting on gas station coffee for breakfast, before the years filled with a leased Mercedes and a feature in a local design magazine. I recount these details not to boast, though I acknowledge it might appear that way. I share this because I want you to comprehend what 19 years of construction entails, before I explain how swiftly it can be dismantled by 2 women stationed at a tent entrance with a clipboard. The signs of deterioration became evident approximately 18 months prior to the wedding, though I did not perceive them as such at the time. I discerned their condition as fatigue, evident in the lack of effort from 2 individuals who'd been married for so long they no longer pretended for each other. Camille began taking phone calls in her home office with the door shut, an action she'd never performed before. She started attending client dinners that concluded past their usual hours, returning home at 10 or 11, carrying a faint aroma of wine and someone else's cologne, which she dismissed as the restaurant, other guests, or nothing in particular. I observed the subtle signs one notices in a residence inhabited for many years before immediately understanding the cause. The man's name was Desmond Achibai-Hartley, a venture capitalist introduced to her through a client referral 12 years his junior, a man who adorned a blazer at a Tuesday lunch and termed it casual. I discovered him in the same manner I unearth everything else meticulously, without disclosing my intentions until I had all the facts. A man who has spent 26 years crafting documents to foresee all ways a family might split apart doesn't recognize the initial indications of his own family fracturing. However, there is an important detail about our wedding day you should grasp before proceeding. At the time I drove out to that vineyard in Middleburg, I was unaware of Desmond. Despite having suspicions about the state of my marriage, I didn't anticipate that the problems had evolved into something severe enough to cause my wife to physically barricade me from entering my stepdaughter's wedding ceremony in front of 200 witnesses. Being absent from a guest list that I had financed to the tune of $41,000 only amplified my sense of alienation. Brielle was 26 when she became engaged to Theo Whitlock, a structural engineer she had met at a mutual friend's barbecue in Arlington. From our first meeting, I found Theo appealing due to his quiet proficiency, reminiscent of myself at that age and his preference for being useful over ostentatiousness. Before announcing her engagement, Brielle contacted me prior to reaching out to her mother. Precisely where I stood in my kitchen is etched in memory as my phone buzzed and her name appeared on the screen. "Whitfield," she said, tears audible in her voice, signifying joyful sobbing. "I wanted you to be the first to know." Theo had asked her for my blessing last night. At 26, she still made me the first call with such significant news. I expressed my pride in her and told her that Theo was a fortunate man, stating I wished to foot the wedding expenses. She protested, but I overruled her. The conversation took place 14 months before the wedding, though it wasn't until those ensuing months that something changed. A transition I didn't recognize at the time. Caught up in my own business, I had 3 estate disputes under mediation that spring. A colleague from my company who was retiring and required his succession plan to be finalized, and a woman whose actions, I now realize, were orchestrating a tale where my presence became gradually less significant in her daughter's wedding storyline. It began subtly. I wasn't invited to the menu tasting, which Camille attributed as an oversight since the planner had only reserved 4 seats, and she thought I wouldn't want to endure 2 hours of salmon comparison discussions. I overlooked that incident. I was also excluded from the seating arrangement talk, though I noticed a draft of the chart open on the kitchen island one evening, which revealed my name was nowhere to be found, not even at a side table. When I inquired about it, she said the plan was still being worked on and, of course, I would be seated. She advised me not to be paranoid, Whitfield. I chose to ignore this as well, for 19 years of trust can make a man tolerant. He hesitates to accept the evidence presented to him. The mock wedding occurred on a Thursday preceding the actual ceremony, at Ashbourne Hill, a vineyard situated off a two-lane road outside Middleburg, which would host the event proper in 2 days. The venue boasted a renovated dairy barn transformed into an events hall, characterized by exposed beams and string lights. Incidentally, I wasn't extended an invitation to the rehearsal dinner either. Camille informed me it was exclusive, limited to immediate family members and wedding party attendees, with instructions for my arrival at the ceremony on Saturday instead. Admittedly, a subdued corner of my mind had begun to grasp the situation by then. I hadn't openly acknowledged it yet, not even in my own thoughts. A man can acknowledge something without truly acknowledging it, and I'd mastered that artistry over the past 18 months. Unaware at the time, I discovered later that Brielle had no involvement in these events. My stepdaughter, who had tearfully toasted us at our wedding when she was 12, had been misled for nearly a year by her mother about the guest list. Camille had discreetly manipulated the guest list from behind the scenes. She informed Brielle that I found it uncomfortable attending, that we'd had a dispute that I was too ashamed to talk about, and it would be best for everyone if my attendance wasn't enforced on their special day. Trusting her mother as daughters often do, Brielle didn't consider questioning the situation directly. She presumed, based on her mother's explanation, that there was a private adult disagreement she shouldn't intervene in. On Saturday morning, I drove to Middleburg while carrying a card I had spent 3 nights refining and a check inside it. A wedding gift added to the other expenses I had already covered, reflecting my character despite an uneasy feeling in my gut. The main lot was full, so I parked in the gravel overflow area, then headed towards the dairy barn entrance where a young woman in black dress and iPad awaited, cross-checking names against a digital list. "Whitfield Calloway," I informed her. "Whitfield Calloway?" She scrolled through the list twice before looking up at me, clearly uncomfortable as she prepared to share unfavorable news with a man dressed more expensively than her monthly rent allows. "I'm really sorry, sir. You're not on the list here." Just then, Camille emerged, seemingly timed, having hidden among a group of white hydrangeas. Her appearance suggested deliberate placement. She donned a chic champagne-hued gown and sported immaculately curled hair. For an instant, a fleeting expression that could have been guilt flitted across her face before stiffening into something else. "Whitfield," she called out in a voice intended for all to hear, loud enough to silence the crowd behind me. "You're not on the guest list." "There must be a mistake." She pressed her hand against my chest subtly yet noticeably, implying her gesture for all to see. 200 individuals, whom I had generously hosted in my home, whose children's college funds I had helped establish, and who had dined at my table on numerous occasions, witnessed my wife of 19 years refuse me entry to an event I had paid $41,000 for. It's crucial you comprehend my character, as it influences the following events. I'm not a man given to public outbursts. Over the course of 26 years, I have been in rooms where families are embroiled in heated disputes over finances, and I learned long ago that the composed individual typically emerges victorious from such situations. So as I looked at Camille, I simply said, "It's all right." 2 simple words. I then turned around, walked back through the gravel lot, past guests who were now openly gawking, past a valet who avoided my gaze, and got into my car. I remained seated for precisely 4 minutes before starting the engine. In those 4 minutes, as I checked the clock upon parking and again before leaving, an unusual calm enveloped me, not sorrowful but calculating. A silence resembling one that descends when a client shares their sibling attempted to falsify a trust amendment during a conference meeting. The 50-minute drive back to Great Falls was without any radio music. Most attendees at the wedding probably didn't grasp what Camille seemed to have overlooked amid her self-justifying haze over the past 18 months. I am an estate planning attorney with extensive experience in creating financial frameworks that dictate a marriage's, business, and inheritance's fate when trust dissolves. My anger doesn't manifest like other men's. Instead, I become meticulous. Upon entering my home office that afternoon in my Navy uniform, I abstained from pouring a drink and refrained from dwelling in self-pity, despite having ample cause. Instead, I booted up my laptop and dialed Garrison Reyes, a longtime friend since our law school days at the University of Virginia, who now managed one of Fairfax County's most esteemed family law firms. For nearly 20 years, we had played golf together on alternating Sundays. He was a guest at my wedding to Camille, seated just 2 tables away. Upon answering on the second ring, he inquired, "Garrison, I need you to clear your morning tomorrow." After I recounted everything that had transpired, he remained silent for an extended period before replying. "Whitfield," he eventually spoke up, "I've known Camille nearly as long as I've known you. It's crucial for us to be certain before we take any irrevocable actions." "There has never been a doubt in my mind," I replied. "Tonight, Camille didn't err, she acted intentionally. The error lay in underestimating my perception of her intent. What Camille was unaware of, what very few in that family comprehended, was the true layout of our financial setup. 17 years prior to our marriage, I had stipulated, albeit gently but resolutely, a prenuptial agreement, not because I mistrusted Camille, but because I had witnessed too many marriages crumble in my practice to ever venture into one unprepared, regardless of how deeply I felt for her. Camille had accepted the condition without much argument at the time. During our marriage, she brought limited financial resources, while my predecessor's agreement at the firm safeguarded the assets I owned, such as a property in Great Falls passed down through 2 generations and an investment portfolio developed over nearly 3 decades. However, it was this particular aspect that held significance. When Callaway Interiors required initial funding 12 years prior, the loan of $240,000 wasn't obtained from a bank, but rather borrowed from my premarital assets as a personal loan. The terms of the LLC were established to give me a contractual lien on the company until the entire loan was repaid. While Camille had returned approximately $60,000 over the years, the majority of the original loan remained unpaid. Periodically, unresolved financial matters gradually interwove themselves into our collective financial scheme, without any definitive resolution ever being recorded. She, having established a highly prosperous design company, one that regularly graced regional publications, was founded on assets I, on paper, still maintained legal rights to. Her preoccupation with the business's success had led her to overlook this matter. In contrast, I pondered over it each year, as is my professional habit when reviewing any document I have drafted. Moreover, I knew something Camille was unaware of. 3 weeks prior to our wedding, I discreetly employed a private investigator, Priscilla Vandermeer, known for her diligence and quiet demeanor, who had previously conducted covert work for numerous clients, to verify my suspicions about Desmond Echeb Hartley. The report arrived on a Tuesday, 2 days prior to a rehearsal dinner I wasn't invited to. Inside was hotel data spanning 11 months from a Georgetown property and photos that I'd glanced at once with professional distance, storing the evidence in my office safe for later analysis. I decided to examine it on my own terms, not Camille's. When Garrison dropped by my house at 8 the following morning, Sunday post-wedding, clutching a leather folder and displaying the focused seriousness of one who had spent a restless night drafting documents, we weren't starting from scratch. We were concluding something I had silently been constructing for months beforehand. "Detail for me your desired sequence of events," Garrison stated, seated opposite me at my kitchen table, the very same table where 8 years prior I aided Brielle with her financial aid forms. "I require immediate and formal enforcement of the security interest on Callaway Interiors. I need a formal demand letter issued for the overdue loan balance in full, as outlined in the original contract, within 30 days. I want the divorce documents drafted, referencing the prenuptial agreement fully, with Desmond Ake Hartley's name and Georgetown hotel records attached to support the infidelity clause, a detail that impacts the spousal support provisions we formulated 19 years ago. Lastly, I wish for all of this to be delivered by tomorrow morning," I added. "I'm not aiming to harm her, Garrison." I've grown tired of individuals equating my patience with weakness. Garrison observed me for a significant span. "As for Brielle," his query carried more weight than any other sentence he could have spoken. "Brielle isn't involved in this," I clarified. "I want you to grasp that unequivocally before we proceed. Regardless of what transpires with Camille, Brielle remains my daughter, and whatever unfolds tomorrow should not affect her directly. I'll manage that discussion personally." The legal documents were disseminated on Monday morning, personally served by a process server to Camille's office on King Street, the same street where my own office is located, 2 blocks away, a detail I observed with a sardonic, unanalyzed irony. The request for repayment of the Callaway Interiors loan was delivered concurrently to the LLC's registered agent. In the late afternoon, the divorce papers along with accompanying documents arrived at our Great Falls residence while I was at work, handling a regular trust signing for an elderly client and her grandson. At exactly 2:14 p.m., the phone began to ring. I allowed it to go to voicemail. It rang again at 2:19, 2:31, and 2:47. By 4 p.m., there were 11 missed calls from Camille and 3 from an unknown number, which later proved to be Desmond's. I did not answer any of them. Upon returning home the following evening, Camille was sitting on the front steps without a coat in the chilly November air, a theatrical gesture reminiscent of our wedding day, where everything seemed staged for an audience of 200. I exited my car cautiously, and we were face to face once again. "You're attempting to ruin me," she declared before I even reached the stairs. Her voice held an edge I hadn't heard in years. $240,000, Whitfield. You expect me to sell my company over a debt from 12 years ago that we both considered insignificant. We didn't agree it was insignificant, I countered, maintaining my composure. You ceased making payments, and I stopped reminding you, as I believed whatever we had transcended such petty matters. Apparently I was mistaken, she added. This is about the wedding. This is your retribution because I made a mistake at the altar, she continued. Camille. I halted mid-step, close enough now to notice her makeup had smeared, that the defensive facade she'd worn for the past year and a half had finally crumbled. I am aware of Desmond. Her lengthy silence ensued, echoed by a neighboring dog's distant barks. Her facial expression bore the weight of a person realizing that the constructed narrative they had maintained for months had disintegrated instantly. I can clarify that, she eventually admitted, which translates to, in my 26 years in this field, I've learned that people say such things only when there is no longer anything left to explain. I don't require your explanation, I retorted. What I needed was for you to ensure my inclusion on a wedding guest list, an event I had paid for. You failed to deliver. Consequently, I no longer need anything more from you either. A week after her wedding, I phoned my stepdaughter and proposed a coffee meeting, exclusively the two of us, at our old haunt in historic Alexandria, a place we frequented during her college years when she needed a listener other than her mother for her frustrations. In denim and an oversized sweater, she arrived looking tired, much like how newlywed brides often look fatigued. Before either of us uttered a word, she was already shedding tears. Whitfield, she said, I didn't realize any of it. I swear on God's name, I had no clue about any of it. My mother informed me that you didn't want to attend, that there was some disagreement between you two you preferred not to discuss. I should have reached out to you instead of accepting her word. I stretched my hand across the little marble table and took hers, a gesture similar to one I made years ago when she was 11 and upset about a failed math test. You didn't do anything wrong, I said to her. You believed your mother as a daughter should. None of this is on you, and I need you to truly understand that, not just nod along pretending to listen. What's going to happen next? She inquired. Are we including you and Mom in this? I always strive to be truthful with her, even when it might not be easy. Your mother and I are getting divorced, I admitted. There will be some tricky financial issues between us, and I won't try to sugarcoat that fact. However, Brielle, pay attention. None of this alters what you and I share. I am still your father in every sense that has ever mattered, and a seating chart at our wedding doesn't change that. She cried more intensely upon hearing this, tears of relief, and for nearly 2 hours we sat together in the coffee shop while she shared with me all about her mother's elaborate wedding planning, the deceptions skillfully woven such that not even a loving daughter like you could have uncovered them in time. Toward the end, Theo arrived, having been contacted by Brielle around the second hour, and he shook my hand while expressing his apologies for not knowing earlier, assuring me that I would always have a place at any table they ever created together. The subsequent months unfolded in the characteristic drawn-out fashion familiar to those experiencing a disputed divorce. Camille enlisted her own attorney, a shrewd and aggressive professional from a Tyson's Corner firm, who attempted in the initial stages to challenge the prenuptial agreement on the grounds of unconscionability, a strategy I had often encountered in my practice and had expected. In less than an afternoon, Garrison demolished that argument during depositions, leading the court through 17 years of financial records, the initial loan documents for Callaway Interiors, and Camille's personal signature notarized and witnessed on the original contract. The business loan was the aspect that seemed to cause her the most pain, I believe, more than the divorce itself and even the public recording of the affair. Callaway Interiors, the company she had built from scratch, a firm boasting congressional clients and magazine features, was compelled into a repayment plan involving liquidation of a substantial portion of her ownership to a rival firm in McLean, which had long desired her client list, and now seized this opportunity at an undervalued price. I'll be frank with you. In those initial months, there was a dark pleasure I derived from seeing the system I'd constructed years prior function as intended. I can't claim pride for that aspect of me, nor deny its existence. Desmond Echeb-Hartley, in turn, vanished from Camille's life with such swiftness that it spoke volumes about their true relationship. It transpired he was establishing a new investment fund, and was disinclined to be linked publicly to a contentious, well-chronicled divorce where he figured prominently in court records. He ceased responding to her calls roughly 3 weeks after the documents were made public. Over time, I learned through the whispering group of shared acquaintances common among tight-knit social groups, Camille celebrated Christmas solitarily in a leased apartment at Falls Church. The Great Falls residence was mine after the terms of the prenuptial agreement, while her business reorganized around her, and the person she'd sacrificed for vanished as soon as the relationship became troublesome. I won't lie, I didn't feel indifferent about witnessing this unraveling. I experienced something. Yet it wasn't pleasure that welled up inside me. It resembled the sensation when a construction built to sustain weight finally gets tested and remains standing, perhaps a sense of validation, but also a subdued, tired one. Contrastingly, Brielle and Theo settled into my life in a way that, if I'm truthful, carried more significance for me than the divorce proceedings themselves. On Sundays, I frequently found myself at their townhouse in Delray, which is a short commute from my office, mirroring the evenings I spent at Camille's kitchen table when Brielle was doing her math homework as a girl. The subsequent spring saw Brielle completing her master's degree in public policy and securing a role with a nonprofit focusing on housing equity in Northern Virginia, a profession that continues to make me immensely proud. When she became pregnant the following year, she contacted me before anyone else, just as she had for the engagement, and when Alina Whitfield Whitlock was born in late autumn, I became an integral part of their family, albeit without any blood ties. My name has been woven into the next generation of this family, a bond that transcends biological connections and emphasizes the importance of those who truly care and participate. In the hospital room, 2 hours after Alina's birth, I held this tiny person who would never encounter a family dynamic where I wasn't indisputably her grandfather. Camille wasn't present in the hospital room. She had requested to attend. Brielle informed me later, softly, similar to how she communicates hard truths now. Brielle had shared with her mother that she required time, explaining that the wedding and subsequent events had shifted something between them that wasn't yet prepared for healing. I didn't coerce Brielle into making that choice. I want to emphasize this point. Not once did I instruct my stepdaughter to pick a side. She made that decision autonomously, considering who had consistently been there for her. As I had learned in my career long ago, people ultimately do show up when it matters. It's nearly 2 years since the incident in Middleburg, since I was informed incorrectly at the tent entrance overflowing with white roses. The phrase, "there must be a mistake," has crossed my mind more times than I can recall since then. Indeed, Camille was right, albeit not in the manner she intended. That day an error occurred, yet it wasn't mine to own. The misconception was believing that 18 years of resilience and stability in a man equated to 18 years of lacking backbone altogether. The blunder was presuming that a man who dedicates his professional life to imposing penalties for shattered trust within other households would bear it casually when his own trust was betrayed, with a crowd of 200 spectators watching. I continue to practice estate law in Alexandria, still assisting families in deciding who inherits what, who is honored, and who is overlooked upon their departure. Now I view my family differently than I once did, shifting focus from bloodline to those who consistently stand by, regardless of the unremarkable, uncelebrated instances that aren't scheduled on seating charts. Brielle now rings me every Sunday, much like she used to discuss her math assignments. Alina, approximately a year old, has begun saying a sound resembling pop, which coincidentally matches the name Theo and Brielle chose for me, a thoughtful gesture not required of them. I don't have complete knowledge about Camille's business's ultimate fate, but rumors suggest Callaway Interiors endured the restructuring, albeit shrunken, and with a new co-owner for half the shares, yet still functional. I genuinely hope she experiences no more adversity. I'm not driven by revenge for its own sake. That was never my purpose. Instead, I aimed to ensure that the structures I had spent years constructing held significance when put to the test. What I discovered in the months following our wedding was that one can love someone for 19 years and still be unaware of their actions when they believe no one is watching closely enough to observe. Amidst the debris, you may uncover who had been observing all along, who repeatedly selected you, not just in grand displays, but in countless subtle instances that never made it to a magazine spread yet hold immeasurable significance. Before departing, let me add a thought on this particular tale. The catalyst for penning this narrative wasn't the wedding itself nor the wealth, but rather Whitfield's patience as layers of small inconsistencies accumulated. Events such as the overlooked tasting, the seating arrangement oversight, and the rehearsal dinner he was excluded from. We all tend to do that. We sense something amiss yet persuade ourselves to dismiss it because acknowledging it would be unbearably uncomfortable. Truthfully, maintaining composure in such situations is not a sign of weakness, but rather a mark of greatness, for you're not merely reacting, but discerning carefully. If an intuition about someone currently nags at you, despite your attempts to rationalize otherwise, consider giving it more credence. Share in the comments if you've ever experienced a similar situation. Newcomers are encouraged to subscribe as such instances are narrated weekly.